All right, we're getting towards the end of everything we need to learn about our game here. So we're going to look at power-ups today in this lesson. Um, what are power-ups, you may ask? Well, when our enemies are defeated, they have a chance to drop a nice little power-up. And power-ups can adjust any of the stats or weapon stats of our player character in pretty neat ways. So the first thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to prepare my power-up template right here. If we navigate to our project folder down here in the bottom left, let me bring up my magnifier so we can use that. So if we bring up our power ups menu right here, we have a power up template. I have a little pre-made folder there if you want to use it for power ups you make, or you can just store them here. But what we need to do though is we need to prepare this power up template. And I'm going to show you another kind of side of Unity, or another thing that we can do inside of Unity, and that's kind of customize what kind of scripts and behaviors we see over here on our inspector. Right now we have a power up behavior script, which is where all of our adjustments are going to be. But when I was prototyping the game out, I was originally using these two scripts as well, but then I went back and made a better version right here in the power up behavior. So we definitely don't need these two scripts anymore. So what we can do is on our gear cog here, we can remove component. Boom. Now we don't need that. We don't need that. And likewise, you can add components to your objects here. I don't really want to get into this because I don't want you to accidentally add something that may break the game. But basically, our inspector is very customizable based on what kind of behaviors and attributes we want to give our objects inside of Unity. So let's get back to the meat of the lesson and learn about how we can make power-ups. So with my power-up template selected, you can see I kind of have this little art preview for us right here. And like I said, the meat and potatoes of this power-up is in the power-up behavior right here. All right, so there's a lot of stuff to digest here. Look how many settings we have. All right, so this is probably my most intensive type of behavior that I've created with the most type of things we can tweak. So it's not that scary whenever you understand exactly how this power up behavior works. So I'm going to go one at a time and kind of describe what all these different areas or different headings within our power up behavior does. All right, and I think we're going to start out from top to bottom. That sounds like a good idea. So we're going to start out with everything from UI down to designations right here. So basically, our UI right here, it says template. So when our power up drops, we're going to have a message in orange show up on our screen and tell us what we're making or what kind of power up we're getting. You know, health increase or health up. You know, awesome. Power up text is we can write a short little designation, and health up will show up right. You know, I can even do something like this, health carrot up, so it looks smaller and more concise. This little text shows up right above our power up. Visual and audio, you can drop sound effects right here that whenever this power up drops, it makes this noise, and whenever you equip it, it makes whatever you drag right here from our sound effects folder. All right, volume controls that as well. All right, but designations are probably one of the most, are probably the most important aspect of our power up behavior here. They affect how our power ups behave and how they power us up, not just what they power up. So in designations, power up behavior, if we click on it, we have these three options. This power up can either increase your stats or be beneficial, or this power up can be negative and subtract some of your abilities away from you, or it can just completely overwrite you and be permanent, and this is what you got now. So a lot of flexibility here as well. Our power up timer right here, when it's set to 0, you can see in my pop-up menu, how long does this effect last once it's collected? But if you leave it a value of 0, this will be a permanent power up. So if you want to have power ups where you can slowly increase your health and damage, then you can create a power up that every time you collect it, you increase by just a few points. So the more you get, the stronger you are. Or you can make a power up that lasts for 10 seconds, and we have infinite jetpack fuel for 10 seconds. All right. I'm going to leave this 0 for right now, and we'll come back to that and give us some examples of how we can use this script to make 4 different types of power ups. And then, which weapon is this going to go to? Well, sometimes you just want to make a health or a jet fuel power up. So it's not going to be a power up weapon or a weapon power up. Or you can say it's definitely going to go to my primary weapon. It's definitely only going to affect my secondary weapon. And then this one's pretty exciting. Player decided. Basically, whatever gun you are shooting as you pick up a power up is what gun it upgrades. So it gives a little bit of player choice on if you see a fire rate increase, is your rocket launcher secondary shooting real slow, or do you want to increase the speed of your machine gun even more? That's up for you to decide as the player. So really exciting dynamic type of gameplay we can create with our power ups. So these first, 9 or 8 things right here, they are just about kind of how the power up affects us. What does it look like? What does it sound like? And actually, does it give, subtract, or overwrite for how long and which weapon? So pretty simple stuff. Again, hover your mouse cursor over all these little names, and you can get a little description I wrote in to remind us what these things do. All right, so it might seem scary when I scroll down here, all these different settings. That's because I've given us access to tweak about 95% of the stats available for our mech, okay? And they're broken up into different headings. So let me talk about these different headings. Common mech stats, okay? So our common properties, basically what it means by common and maybe not common is no matter what kind of behavior we choose, let me zoom in. No matter what behavior we choose right here, our common abilities will be able to be used, okay? So even if it's an additive or subtractive or a complete overwrite, we can use these values for any behavior that we see here. So that's everything from our dash, move speed to our ammo, fuel, and then we even have common shot options, our bullet spin, our fire rate. Unfortunately, we can't change the look of our weapons whenever we get at it. Wasn't able to add that in time. Took a lot of extra little engineering to get that particular thing to work. So lifetime of your bullets, start size, width, basically anything you see here, we can tweak on any kind of behavior we see here, additive, subtractive, overwrite. So that might make more sense when you see, well, what's not common? Well, for overwrite behaviors, if we picked overwrite right now, these common stats would be affected. These common shot options would be affected. And then these overwrite only options would be affected. So you could change any of these stats right here to overwrite that ability or overwrite whatever you want. And it's mostly gun stuff. There was just a way with booleans like the yes or no type stuff that made it a little bit harder to do an overwrite with. So mostly we're going to make sure that that overwrite option only is mostly our check boxes. So that means what we're used to looking at with our shot variables when we've been designing our weapons, it's going to look a little bit different. It's going to be broken up just a little bit, just for the sake of you knowing what's overwrite only and then what's non-overwrite options. So what does that mean? So if you just wanted an additive or subtractive behavior, like, do we want to get this or do we want to take this away? Well, you couldn't use any of these values right here, so don't worry about these values. But that doesn't matter. I want to do homing. I want to do homing missiles as a power up. Well, don't worry about it because that's what these non-overwrite options do. And I've actually simplified how they work for us. So if you want to add an additive homing shot ability, then just check homing shot. and then it adds this much or subtracts this much from our homing power up ability. So, you know, I could give this a value of 2, and that makes my missiles track a little bit better. Okay, so we do have our every behavior covered that we can kind of give our weapons, but just to make things a little less complicated, even though they're kind of categorized in all these different ways, uh, our additive or subtractive options right here at the bottom make that a little bit easier. So we can add spreads, shots, homing bullets, bullets that pierce through enemies, boomerang there and back shots, zigzag attributes, explosive shot, and shield shot. And keep in mind, for the most part, except for homing, boomerang, and zigzag, you can only be one of these 3. You can't have a homing boomerang or a boomerang zigzag shot. Um, but you could make a spread shot, piercing shot, uh, explodes when it dies, boomerang. And you can add all those options, or you can make each one of these their own power up. So you add a lot of replayability with, okay, my spread shot didn't drop this game, but I got like 2 piercing shots, and it made my bullets just do super damage as it passed through enemy. So that's the kind of emergent gameplay we want to capture with our power up system. All right. So now that I've kind of talked about our categories and explained how this is somewhat grouped, I could talk about, well, how do you actually update these? What kind of numbers and values do you put? But instead of just talking about it, why don't we make 4 different type of power-ups? That way you can get a clear idea of how these systems work. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a health increase, permanent health increase power up. So every time you collect this, you'll get a little bit more health, and you'll be a little bit more durable. Health is basically like armor or survivability in this game in general. So let's make a health power up. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go down to our project window down here, and we're going to go to our power up template, and we're going to hit Control D. We don't want to overwrite this and rename it, then we lost our template. But what we can do is duplicate it and then rename it by we're going to right click on it to rename it. We're going to call this health increase. All right, that's going to tell me that this is a permanent health increase. If this was like a timed health increase, I'd probably call it something like health increase timed, something like that. Or an overwrite, whatever you want to call like an overwrite. But I'm just going to use a regular health increase in this case. All right. So basically what I've done is create a brand new prefab of a power type, and I've given it a name. Now we need to describe its behavior. And we can do this from our project window. We don't need to drag this into our scene if we don't want to. We may want to for testing purposes. But I'm just saying, if we wanted to just select my health increase power up, we could do so in the project window, and then all of our attributes are still visible to us. But, it might be a good idea to test the stuff we make so we know we know it's working. So I am going to drag health increase into the scene. I'm just going to place it kind of in the bottom in empty space because it's not going to be a permanent thing. I only want my power-ups to drop when enemies do, although you could just leave power-ups under buildings so whenever they're destroyed, it's like a little goodie bag. Okay, well, that's up to you though. Health increase. Now that we have it in the scene, we can really start tweaking it to make sure we know what's going on with it and we can test it. So we have a description over here, and you'll remember I already kind of tweaked it to where it's got our description of our power up flashing through the screen, so our player knows exactly what kind of benefits we just got. I'll leave you guys to decide what kind of audio that you want, but I'll show you how we can drag stuff in. If we go to our project window down here and go to sound effects, we see all these clips, audio clips, and from there it's just a matter of I'm going to take Laser B. So what does Laser B sound like? I want to make Laser B the sound it makes when it equips. Well, I need to go back over here and select my health increase. And then I'm going to give this laser B for when it equips. And I think there's like a zap sound. Yeah, I want that sound. Or is this better? No, that sounds dumb. All right, so yeah, that's a health drop. So zap B is what we'll play whenever our health power up drops. And then we can tweak the volume to our heart's content. And then we have to decide what kind of power up behavior do we want to give this health thing. Well, I want this to be a permanent health increase that can drop several times in a level, and it gives you small amounts of health every time we collect it. So what we're going to do is we want it to be a beneficial power up. We don't want it to be timed. We want it to be permanent, so we'll leave it at 0. Is this going to be a weapon power up? It's not going to be a weapon power up. And so when we come down and we need to tell our power up how to function, which stats to affect, we just come down and find the health that we want to see. And if you're going to get increased health, we don't just want to increase health. We want to get our max health and our regular health increased. So we kind of have to think of the behavior of our power up whenever we, what do we want to achieve with this power up? Well, we want multiple health power ups to be able to drop in a level, maybe like 10 of them. So maybe you shouldn't increase your health by 100. If our health right now is 100. If we're going to have 10 of these drop, possibly, maybe we don't want to increase it by 100 each time and quadruple our health. Number bloat is very real, and if you increase values by a lot, it's going to make it harder to balance. But if you want to create the experience where you're just getting absolutely outrageous values, by all means, go ahead. It's your experience. So whenever we get this power up, I'm only going to increase my health by 10. So every time this drops, my health goes up by 10 points. All right. And, well, what about all these other settings? I mean, is it going to set my maximum ammo to 0? No. Anytime, and this, what I'm about to say, applies to additive, subtractive, and overwrite values. Anytime you leave a value at 0, it is ignored entirely. Okay? So if you wanted to kind of make your move speed, no move speed for the player, guess what? If you set it at 0, it's going to be ignored. So maybe the smart thing to do would be to set it like 0.01. It's not 0 anymore, so my script is going to see like, oh, we want to set our speed. I'm pretty sure 0.01 speed is going to basically be standstill. So if you want to give small values to the player, don't make them 0, just make them really, really, really small. But this isn't a speed power up, so I'm going to set it back to 0. Boom. Since this is only a health power up, I'm only going to tweak my health properties here. I'm going to leave everything else alone, all the bullet stats. It's not even an overwrite, so we don't need to look there. And it's not any kind of homing shot or piercing. The only thing we want to affect is our health. All right, so let's zoom out, and I'm going to select my health increase power up prefab, and we're going to hit apply up here, my inspector, to save it and make it so. All right, great. So that's a health increase. Why don't we test this? So a good way to test this, let's see, would be to select my player mech right here. And then if we expand our stats right here, we can see that my health, I'm at 120 maximum health. Let's set it to 100. That way we can clearly see 110, 120, all that stuff. But I think just running into it once will be fine. Unless, why don't we actually just make a few copies of it. So every time we collect this, we're going to be getting 10 points of health. Okay? But we're going to have enemies spawning, so it's going to be a little chaotic. And I know the last videos, the game volume was a little loud. I think I tweaked that and fixed it. So hopefully that won't happen again. If it does, I apologize. I won't talk too much while I play. All right. So let's play. I'm going to select my mech. I'm going to make sure I can see my health right here in the inspector. And I'm not going to maximize on play. We're going to turn that off so we can kind of still see my environment. Boom. You can hear all my power-ups make their boom sound because they all spawned. And let's pay attention right here in my inspector at these health stats. And I'll keep it zoomed in. So I'm about to collect this power-up right here. Boom. I equipped it. 110 health. 120 health. 130 health. Perfect. And why don't we see... I should have pressed play and we could see the message that it brings up. All right, we press play. And you can see the little text we have right here. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Health pointing up. Looks a little weird, so maybe I would check that. Boom. Health up message displayed for a few seconds. Health up. Health up one more time. Awesome. So that's how we basically make a little power up. I'm going to make 3 more that are that are a little bit different. We're going to make a subtractive one. We're going to make a timed power up, and then we're going to do an overwrite where we have our Shuriken Storm weapon. But I'm going to make a weapon that overwrites it and turns it into the basic shotgun. So throughout our game, we can switch weapons easily and overwrite to a new weapon. It will reset all the stats, but at least you can make a decision like, oh, this weapon isn't working out for me. You might have the ability to equip a brand new weapon with an overwrite power up. That's how that could be useful. All right, so let's get to that. I'm going to go ahead and delete these out of my hierarchy up here because I'm going to start testing some other power-ups. And since I applied that in my inspector as a prefab save, I don't have to worry about losing it because it's going to be right here in my power-ups menu. Okay, so to make a new one, we're going to create a new power-up, and then we're going to duplicate our template with Control D, and we're going to call this Fire Rate Decrease. So we're going to make a hazardous power-up that if you accidentally walk over it, it'll decrease your fire rate. Or maybe you have a weapon that shoots too fast, or you have a weapon that its speed is too fast. You want it to travel slower so it can do more piercing damage, for instance. Well, just because it's a decrease doesn't mean it's bad in that instance. The more we slow down piercing shots, the more damage they do as they pass through enemies. So even though this is a subtractive power-up, it could be beneficial in that instance, right? That's what we're all about making compelling player choices during our gameplay. That's what makes games fun, So with my fire rate decrease newly made, I'm going to drag it into my inspector and let me position it in the scene so I don't have to walk too far to get it. Perfect. And why don't we get to editing it? All right, so we're going to call this not health up, but fire rate down. And then we're going to call this fire rate, and then do a capital V for pointing down. Okay, and you won't, let's see, I don't think it updates the text till you hit runtime. So I don't know if you'll see, yeah, you won't see the changes until you hit play, but that's fine. And let's give it some sound effects. I want to do like let's do this one. Like, ooh. What we'll do is we'll make that Zap D, what happens when we equip it. That sounds kind of like a depressive, your fire rate went down. And then whenever it drops, why don't we do something like Zap A? So we can kind of hear it just do a ting. It's not the best sound effects. And guess what? If you want to go online and download your own sound effects, just drag them and drop them into this folder from your desktop. Literally just drag whatever from here to there. Make sure it's a .wav, a WAV file, or an MP3 file. And those are the 2 native files that I know work for sure inside of Unity. All right, great. So we got the sound of my fire rate decrease. And let's go down our topics and we can see how this is going to function now. So subtractive, we want to take away our fire rate. We want it to be permanent, so we'll leave it 0. And what weapon does this affect? Well, let's make it player decided. So as a player is shooting, if they're shooting their special secondary weapon, well, guess what? You just lower the fire rate of your secondary special weapon. So what we have to do now is we have to find where our fire rate is at. And I believe it's under common shot options. So does that mean we write in -1 for our negative fire rate? No. Since it's subtractive, it already takes care of the negative for us, because that wouldn't work very well for something like this when you can't even go negative because it's on a slider, right? So subtractive is going to take care of that for us. So we're leaving everything else at 0, remember? And we're going to do my fire rate. Well, what kind of numbers should we put here? I mean, I could just know out of the top of my head because I made the game, and I do. But why don't you check what kind of gun you have already equipped in your scene? So I'm going to check in my Shuriken Storm. Remember, in our level manager, that's where we equip our player weapons. So Shuriken Storm is up there. And I'm going to go to my inspector now and go check out its fire rate. So its fire rate is 0.5. So if I hit this power up and I subtract it by 1, then I'm going to have a 0 fire rate and the gun's broken. So that's how you design a bad game. Unless you want to make a game where it just breaks your gun. That's pretty mean. But hey, actually that could be pretty fun. Anyway, I digress. So we know that fire rate is, we shoot every half second. Every 0.5 seconds we shoot a shot. So we want my fire rate decrease not to drop all that often. I'm kind of just theory crafting on how I want to design levels using this power up penalty. Maybe it'll drop once or twice a level. So, easy to avoid because it won't drop that often. So that means if you're dumb enough to actually collect it, I want it to take a pretty good chunk away. So I'm going to do something like 0.2 for your fire rate. Common mech stats. Oh yeah, we want to go to common shot options. There's our fire rate, 0.2. So if you collect this, then you have an extra 0.2 seconds added to your fire rate. I think that's how that works. Let's figure it out and test. Fire rate's different. The more when you take away numbers from fire rate, it actually performs faster and better. So I think I took care of that. And remember, everything else we're going to just leave as zeros. Okay? We don't want to update anything else. We just want to subtract our fire rate. All right, so why don't we test this? We can get an idea. Oh, and you can see that negative penalties are in red. So they're very easy. It's not like it's hidden. All right, so there's the rhythm of my fire rate. Okay, so I got you. For things like the fire rate, we do need to add a negative. Okay, this is going to get into weird math. But if this was we just have to remember that fire rate, smaller numbers equals faster fire rate. So you can see I have it written there for you. So what we want to do is, since this is subtractive, we do want to take away 0.2. Okay? I know, or negative 0.2. That's why we got to test our power-ups, because you would have never guessed that. You'd have been like, hey, why did my fire rate get faster? Well, oh, okay. I guess I need to go the opposite and make it a negative number now. So that's how we could fix that. So if your behavior doesn't quite does the opposite of what you think, just slap a negative number in front of it if you can. So that's our rhythm. That's our new rhythm. So now we shoot a little bit slower, and that's what we want. Why don't we create a few of them now that we know it works, and we can really see how punishing this can be. All right, I'll be shooting the whole time so we can see how fast I'm firing. So, I mean, that's pretty punishing. Our shots got really slow there. I think it ended up being more than half as slow as when I started. So great. We got our power up decrease working. I'm going to delete those extra ones. And I don't want to delete all of them, though, because we haven't applied our prefab. So we're going to apply that prefab right there. Now my fire rate decrease is made. And we can see it in my inspector here. We can even check out its stats now. It's subtractive, player decided, and we do a negative 0.2 on our fire rate there. So awesome. We're getting some power-ups made. All right, so why don't we build our next power up and we can see how timed power ups work for us. What we want to do is we want to build a power up that gives you infinite jet fuel or a lot, so you can pretty much fly continuously for a short amount of time. So we're going to duplicate my power up template. Remember, we always want to duplicate our templates. We're going to call this timed infinite jets. So just something where you can get the gist of what the power up is. So when you're assigning it to things later, you know what you're dragging and pulling. And we're going to drag this over into our inspector, and we are going to position it right in front of our players so we can kind of get its effect. And now we're set up. And why don't we start tweaking those stats now? So here we have our description, power up description. Let's say 5-second infinite jet fuel exclamation marks. And this is the message that's going to pop up on my screen. And we'll call this jets. And that's what's going to appear above my. So the sound effects, we're not going to get too fancy with them because I don't really have good ones to get fancy with. Laser, we don't want it. That'll be confusing. Bullet might be confusing. Power up A. Nice. What does power up B sound like? Ooh, that sounds cool. Whenever it drops, well, whenever I equip it, we're going to give that ring. I like that one. And whenever it drops, we'll do the zap A. So those are some good sounds. So we're going to make a timed power up that gives us infinite jet fuel. So we're going to make this an additive power up. We're not going to overwrite. Overwrites are permanent no matter what timer is set at. Our effect timer, we're going to do 5 seconds of infinite jet fuel. And it's not a power up weapon. So let's make sure we set that. Otherwise, I'll show you what happens if we don't set it whenever we start testing this. Right now, let's make sure we can collect it by setting to not a power up weapon. And what we want to do here is down to our fuel. For 5 seconds, we want to give our player 9,999 extra fuel. And we want to set his current fuel rate at the same thing. Or, we don't have to do anything because we can make the fuel rate up to 10. So you grab the power up and it starts just boosting how much fuel you have. Let's see how that works. All right. So I'm going to press start. Let's zoom in. That number is so big. Look, it barely filled up. So let's restart. That's not going to be the way we do it. We need to give our player fuel as well. So let's do 9,999, same as how much maximum fuel. And we'll keep our fuel rate up. What the logic is doing is it's giving us this much maximum fuel. It's giving us this much current fuel that we have. And it's giving us 10 extra points of recharge rate. And then 5 seconds goes by, and then it takes away 9,999 points of fuel. And then it takes away almost 1,000 of our current fuel. And it takes away 10 units of our fuel rate. So that's how it happens. It adds and then it subtracts these numbers, okay? So with that in mind, why don't we test this? All right, perfect. All right, perfect. Oh, nice. Infinite jets. Look how far I can fly. And then power up time's over, so I come plummeting back down. And it takes a second for my fuel to recharge. Now I'm at normal jet capacity or normal fuel capacity. You know what? This isn't just for jets. This is fuel. This is for sprinting as well. So this actually should be kind of labeled as fuel, infinite fuel. And then we'll call this fuel because it takes care of our sprint and that I call it sprint or dash. They're interchangeable in this game. It takes care of our dash and jet costs. Um, you may think, I'll just set my jet cost to really low. Well, that's the problem. There is with your vocabulary. Whenever you use an additive or subtractive power up, you're not setting anything. You're either adding this value or subtracting that value. So if you set it to 0.01, you're like, oh yeah, when they get this, jet fuel is going to cost nothing. No, basically you're increasing your fuel cost by this much whenever you do a timed power up. Increasing or decreasing, whichever one you choose there. Overwrite is where you set stuff, but overwrites are permanent and can't be timed. It's just the rules of my logic, so get used to it. So that does it for our power up, and maybe we need to come and timed infinite fuel. Let's name it a little bit more clearer. All right, timed infinite fuel. Let's apply the prefab in my inspector, and boom. Now we have a power up that gives us 5 seconds of infinite fuel so we can sprint and fly to our heart's content. All right, last power up coming up. So we haven't really touched how we can do an overwrite power up. So in my mind, the best use of overwrite power ups is to overwrite whatever weapon you're currently using to another weapon altogether. So if you have a machine gun and a shotgun that we're about to make drops, you might have an upgraded machine gun that has spray shot, spread shot, and spinning bullets or something. But when you collect the shotgun, it'll set you back to these base stats on it. So it's a little bit of a decision there. Is my machine gun working? It's maybe not, but it's a little bit better than maybe a standard shotgun. But I could keep playing and eventually upgrade my shotgun too. So it's a double-edged sword there, right? Um, so with that said, why don't we see how we can make them instead of posturing on how we can use them in the game? Power up template. Let's duplicate it, and let's call this. We're just going to call this shotgun. We're not going to call it increase, decrease, or timed. What it is what it is. This is shotgun. It might be. Maybe we should do something like shotgun power up. That way we know it's not like the shotgun weapon, like from down here. See, that's just called shotgun. So if we named our power up shotgun as well, we could get confused with that pretty easy, I believe. So it's always good to clearly describe what we're, I originally wanted to do it, and then I'm like, hey, shotgun already exists. So there you go. Power ups, there's shotgun overwrite. Where did that go? Shotgun power up. Why don't we bring it in and make it, test it, and call it a day? Zoom in. There's my power up right there. And we're going to zoom into my inspector and get to work. All right, this is going to be called shotgun. And this is going to be called shotgun. And I'm not going to fool with sound clips. I don't think. No, don't worry about it. And we're going to set it to overwrite. And we're going to make it a player decided overwrite. So you can overwrite which gun, your secondary or your primary fire, the shotgun gets applied to. So same with additive or subtractive. Overwrite ignores anything with a 0. So that doesn't mean whenever we do an overwrite, all we have to tweak every single value when we overwrite. No, we only have to tweak the stats that govern how this shotgun works. So, actually, now that I think about it, it may, if you have like a spread shot and we're not updating spread, it may turn your spread shot into a shotgun spread shot. I don't know. I haven't tested it that in depth yet. I know I made this stuff, but didn't have time to test it. That's what you guys are for. All right, cool. Shotgun power up. Well, how do we make a shotgun power up? Well, we have to give it the stats that make up a shotgun. So we can actually maybe bring in my pre-made shotgun right here. Why don't we bring that into the hierarchy so we can refer back to what the stats are for it right here. Okay. So I know if we go here, shotgun power up, it is not mech stats, common shot options. So why don't we start looking at lifetime, speed, spray, and just start kind of reconstructing how the shotgun works. All right, what was our fire rate? All right, oh, I wasn't down all the way. Fire rate is 0.5. So our fire rate is going to be, let's come down here. Let's kind of get them at the same height so I can kind of get an idea of, there we go. Oh, they just change, I guess, between them. That's confusing. Whenever you scroll up here, it affects where you are right here. So if I'm at the bottom right here, I'm kind of almost at the bottom right here. Okay, Unity, there's probably a reason you did that, so I'll trust you. So, common shot options. I know I'm scrolling like crazy. Our fire rate was 0.5. How many number of shots is 5? So let's make sure we're shooting 5 bullets. So I'm quickly now trying to find these. Our shot interval is 0.01. So shot interval 0.01. So that's nice that we did that. It could have very well been 0 over here. You know, there's no shot interval. All 5 bullets fire at once. So if this would have been 0, you know, all 5 bullets, there's no time in between the volley spray of lead. If we would have set this 0 right here, it wouldn't have updated. So we would have had to set this to something low like 0.01. All right. Multi-shot adjust is not accounted for. We don't have it. Oh, sorry about that. My throat got really dry. I had to take a sip. So I think we were thinking about more shotgun stuff. So how much damage per bullet does our shotgun do? Well, we have our shotgun weapon selected right here. And we still do 1 damage per bullet. So, you know, that's pretty good damage. So damage per bullet 1. And shotgun has multi-shot damage adjust. So we do have an interesting variable set here. Even though damage per bullet is set to 1, we don't, and we're shooting 5 bullets. Does that mean every single 5 of my bullets does 1 damage? Well, we don't really want it to. I kind of want my shotgun to be just as effective as, you know, a starting weapon. So we set our multi-shot damage adjust to a specific value. If it was 0, or rather if it was set to 100 or 1, then every single bullet fired out of my 5-shot spray, its damage, every single one of those bullets would be 1, and you would get 5 damage if you hit an enemy with all 5 bullets. If you set it to 0, then something interesting happens. We still, our damage per bullet is 1, and we're shooting 5 bullets, but we still want the whole volley, the whole spread of bullets to equal 1 damage. So all that damage is divided, your damage per bullet is divided into all 5 shots. So you're doing like 0.2, 0.2, 0.2, 0.2 until it equals, you know, 1. Or you can go somewhere in between. So I think I had it set at 0.2. So why don't we set the shotgun value at 0.2. 0.2 right there. Lifetime for the bullets. I wish there was a faster way. There probably is. I just didn't do it. 0.4 seconds. So this is a short range weapon. Our bullet speed is 60. And our spray was about 10, I believe. Spray. Yeah, or 20 actually. My bullet spray was 20. And how much did this cost per bullet? How much ammo are we using per bullet? 1 per bullet. That's about standard. If we do 1 damage, I feel like it should do about 1 call. It should only cost 1 ammo. And our start size was 1.5. So let's update our start size. Overwrite options. Only remember, I think if they're left alone, then it doesn't get updated. So, were there any other things that we had to pick? Forward shot. We want to make sure we're shooting at least a forward shot in here. Angle. I think that was about it. Didn't have any weird. I don't want to update the looks or anything of these bullets. All right, I'm a little nervous because this is a lot of stuff for the overwrite to take care of. So the only thing left to do is to test it. All right, let's make my game a little bit bigger. So that's my shuriken storm. Spray of bullets. Kind of almost looks like a shotgun. It's not. So I'm gonna, as I shoot it, I'm gonna walk over this, and now I still have shurikens, but they shoot out in shotgun form instead of storm. And like it was, they go a little bit farther, a little bit faster. So it's like a shotgun. And let's see if we can destroy some things. That's good enough for me. You'll also notice that it got really quiet, right? So I guess we should add some sound effects to this power up so it doesn't get really quiet. So in our overwrite only, where was that? Let's see. So I got shotgun selected, so that's bad. I'm going to go ahead and in my inspector, there's my shotgun weapon I was using to base my shotgun power up on, so you can maybe get confused even still. I'm going to go ahead and delete that because I only want to adjust. I got all of the information I needed there. Overwrite options, like so. VFX explosion, bullet explosion. I don't. Let's just update our sound effects. All right. When the bullet's destroying. Okay. VFX explosion should actually be hidden from us. That's actually the green big explosion that comes up out of it. So just never really touch it unless the explosions don't work at the end of it. Why don't we make this an explosive shotgun? Because I want to test that real quick. So explosive, we're going to overwrite to be explosive. Explosion damage is going to be 0.1. Explosion lifetime will last 3 seconds. Explode after our bullet's lifetime is up. We'll adjust our damage a little bit for every single explosion. You know, we shoot 5 bullets. I don't want all the explosions left behind to do like crazy damage because we're shooting 5 bullets. Start size will be, we'll start at 1. We'll grow over its lifetime of 3 seconds. Our grow maximum, we'll have it grow up to 7 size at a rate of 2. We'll make the explosion repeat, so it's like boom, 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 and the repeating rate 0.1. So let's see if we need to include a VFX explosion. Nope, it works. Yeah, look at that. Oh, it's so cool, isn't it? Explosive shotgun. And look at that. That's just a flak cannon. That's just a field. We destroyed the spawner. Dude, that's just so much destruction. Every time when the bullet blinks, it does damage. It does explosive damage. Alright, so I guess we can just ignore. And, alright, well, I made an explosive shotgun, so I guess we'll do that. Explosive shotgun power up. And now you'll notice that we were getting some explosions, so we don't have to worry about VFX explosion. Don't use that. But we do need to give us some sound effects and what it sounds like when we sound that plays when the bullet hits an object. All right, well, let's go to our sound effects. And whenever we fire, why don't we do a bullet? Or I don't know, that sounds lame. That's too much for a shotgun. I mean, maybe. Definitely not. I think it is. Alright. That's a little bit delayed, though. We'll just give it a... what does laser B sound like? Boom. Yeah, we'll give it a laser. We'll give it a, Just something different. All right. So we're gonna go to common shot. Nope. Overwrite only options. Yep. And we're gonna give it that laser B whenever we fire it, and whenever we hit something, we'll just give it an explosion A. And it looks like we can. Oh, when we overwrite stuff, we can change the look of stuff. I was speaking like a dummy. And why don't we give it a pointed missile? Or I just can't. That seems so vanilla. Why don't we shoot out a bunch of arrows? It's like a spray shot. All right, so let's see if those options take hold. So, Shuriken Storm. Nope, looks like yeah. But we have a cool sound effect for our shotgun now. Alright, cool. I'll quit playing around. Alright, so that's how we can make an overwrite weapon type of power up, where it just changes up our weapon totally, gives us a new option to play around with. Explosive shotguns. Last step, always apply that prefab. And we get deleted out of the scene. Alright, so we're basically done, but we need to talk about how the power up manager works really fast. No big deal. All right, so now that we have a few power-ups made, we can now get them to start spawning whenever we defeat an enemy. Okay? Perfect. So we're going to go up to my game manager. Over here in my hierarchy, we want to find game manager. This is where we have our power-up manager located. And over here in my inspector, I'm going to collapse everything, and we'll zoom in, and we can see power-up manager right here. My enemy manager was the thing where we had the list of enemy A and B, and then all the different elements and stuff. Well, guess what? Same thing for our power-ups. So we can populate as many or as few power-ups that we want to spawn in our level. So if you're not quite sure how this works, I recommend definitely going back and watching enemy spawners and how the enemy manager works for us. Because I'm going to kind of go fast. So our power-up list size, we have, how many power-ups? We have 4 power-ups. So this is the template. I'm going to rename it just to like template, get out of the way. So we have 4 power-ups now. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to increase our size over here, our power-up list size, to 4. But we don't want to spawn template. Why don't we bring in all of our power-ups we just made? So I accidentally selected off of my game manager. I hate when I do that. So that's the only bad thing about dragging and dropping. Is there just another way we can populate this? Well, you can. Let me show you. We can go to element 0. We want to change this to our health up. If we hit the bullseye right here, then this little window pops up here. I'll bring it to the middle so we can see it. And then we can just type in the name, health increase. And we can double click it, and there's our power up. So if you don't really enjoy dragging and dropping, because you accidentally always select it instead, and then, that's not my power up manager anymore. Well, I guess I better go select game manager. That can be a little bit of a hassle. So that's just another option for you. You can click the little bullseye next to it and type the name of the power up in. Many ways to do things inside of Unity. Fire rate decrease. Let's drag and drop that in. I'm a drag and drop kind of guy. Shotgun, timed infinite jets. All right, so we have 4 different power-ups populating my list of power-ups, and they all pertain to their particular elements. So remember, when we have a list, we have to make the sizes equal all the same, and that opens up elements 0 through 3 that pertain to these power-ups. And now we can dictate when an enemy is defeated and the enemy power-up says, hey, I'm an enemy that drops a power-up, but shit, what power-up do I drop? I have 4 choices. This is going on in the last seconds of this mech's life. I mean, we get to experience meeting our dog or something, life flashing before our eyes. Can you believe it? These enemy mechs are stressing over what power up they're going to drop for you. They're good guys like that. So, as the mech's dying, he's been chosen by fate to drop us a power up. Well, which one? Which one? Um, well, our health increase, we want to see it drop more often than not. So, I'm going to give it a high rarity chance. Our fire rate decrease, that's kind of a mean power up. So, I want to make it spawn very few times. So, you may not ever see it spawn in the level, right? Uh, Shotgun power up, same thing. It's not very often you're going to want to change your weapon or give your player the option to. At least in my mind, this is the way I'm designing my game. And timed infinite jets, let's make that drop about half the time. So what we're seeing, okay, I want to make it not drop that much. I want to kind of see them drop in our demonstration we're about to do. All right. So, our jets, the 5 seconds of jets will drop half the time. Our health up will drop a lot of the times. And then every once in a while, we have a 1 in 3 chances or so of either getting a new shotgun, explosive shotgun, or we decrease our fire rate. Okay, cool. So that's what that rarity chart does. So I'm going to collapse it so we're not confused. What score needed to start dropping the power-ups? So this is another way where we can kind of have more control over what options we give our players when they play. So again, our size needs to be 4, and then we can put a score in for all of these. So score needed for my health. Remember, my health is element 0. I want my health to drop from the beginning. Fire rate decrease, that's going to be able to drop from the beginning too. Don't worry about it. Shotgun power up, maybe start spawning it at 10 points once we have a chance to kind of fill out the current weapon. And infinite time jets, we're going to start. I want to make my shotgun start spawning after 5 points. I'm just picking arbitrary small values so we can test it and demonstrate how they work. But time jet seems like something that should be able to drop last. All right, and here's some 2 rare cases right here. So that's it for all the different lists for our power-ups. We just need to check what we're spawning, how often they're chosen to drop, and the score we need to start seeing them drop. We need to kind of earn these. We need to kill enough enemies to earn these to start dropping. So here's a few considerations. I don't know why I coded it like this, but it works pretty well. So anytime we get a burst fire, a power up or something like that, or a shot added to our shots, it would be pretty lame if we had an extra bullet added to us, but we didn't see it because it was literally riding inside of our other bullet. So we couldn't see all the extra bullets we're shooting. I mean, it might be powerful to have one bullet packed with like 10 bullets, Steve Irwin with the strength of 10 men packed into one Australian man. But I think for visual references, we want to see the coolness of having all these shots. So anytime we get a shot added, our power up manager is going to put this amount of time between shots in our volley. And I usually like going 0.08. That's a pretty standard interval time. We can see all of those bullets we're firing, and we get a sense of accomplishment because we're increasing those bullets. We're not just seeing one bullet with a bunch of them stuffed inside. And anytime we get a spread shot power up, when you get a spread shot, this is the way it works. You shoot a forward bullet normally, and then if you get a spread shot power up, you shoot a top and bottom. Your forward one goes away. So what angle between the top shot right up here that goes up here and the bottom shot that goes down here, what's the angle between the two right here? So the lower the number here, the tighter the cone. So it's like a tight spread. The higher the number, you could do 90 and have our spread shot shoot up and down. So that's up to you. But we got to kind of dictate what that first 2-shot angle is like. So I'm going to do about 20. And then if we get another spread shot power up, maybe 2 drop in the same level, we get all 3 shots. So we get top shot, bottom shot. I know my screen's going crazy, and then middle shot. So what's the angle between all 3? Well, I like to start somewhat big because if we get more and more spread shots, I haven't added where you can shoot 7 different spreads. The maximum's 3, but I still want to be able to keep having benefits of spread shot power ups dropping. So every time you pick up a spread shot, it's going to decrease. It's going to tighten this angle by this much. So if we start out at like a 40 angle, and I get my third or fourth spread shot, well, I already have all my spreads. Now we're just going to start making that cone tighter. We're going to start subtracting 10 every single time we pick it up until I think it caps out around 5 in my code. So it's like a tight spread. That's going to be a devastating weapon. So when I have 2 spreads, I'm going to set it at 20. When I have 3, I'm going to set it at 45. And every subsequent spread shot I pick up after 3 shots, I'm going to tighten up that spray cone by 10 units. All right, so that's basically our power-up manager. And I think the only thing left to do is to test this out and see how it's working. So to get any kind of power-ups to drop, we have to ravage somebody. So the enemies have their own chance to drop a power-up. Or I may not be spawning power-ups in my level. Oh, okay, so nothing dropped. What's going on? Well, I'm going to select my game manager, and I'm going to expand my GM script down here. And guess what? Do I want to drop power-ups in this level? Right now, it's turned off. So that's all I had to do is just go to my game manager and turn it on. That's why we test. That's why we test. All right, so hopefully this works. I see one floating in there, but I'm not going to try to get it. Let's jump on top. Let's take a shortcut. Boom, health power up start dropping. Health up. Oh, there's a decrease in fire rate right there. Let's pick it up. Oh, no. Fire rate. I'm shooting so much slower. Alright, so we started seeing a change. Oh, differential. Yeah. Alright, it works, guys. Perfect power-up behavior and some compelling choices. A little bit of variety added there. I didn't know I was going to get that fire rate decrease. I didn't even see the shotgun drop. So that's how we do it, guys. Thanks for listening.